What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Here we are with another reaction. In this one, we have the SAS soldier who saved a division of Americans from ambush and annihilation. First off, on the behalf of those soldiers you saved, let me just say thank you to this SAS soldier. That's absolutely amazing and nothing but the utmost gratitude and respect. Now, before we dive into this, if you guys happen to enjoy, please don't forget to smash subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and if you'd like to support this channel by becoming a member, all you gotta do is hit that join button to receive your exclusive benefits. Let's dive right in.
In the town of Mous, confusion reigned. The local SS commander was busy assembling his men when all hell broke loose. The roar of jeep engines, the rattle of gunfire. The German positions were under attack. Captain Henry Druce and his party of fellow SAS men had seized their opportunity, and they were out to do serious damage. As they tore through the village, Druce and his men inflicted massive casualties on the SS troops. The German forces mustered a response wherever they could, but in the end, it was the SAS men's limited ammunition that halted their attack. As their machine guns sputtered into silence, Druce and his party knew their work was done. Just as quickly as they had come, they vanished back into the hills.
I love it.
The engagement might have been over, but its effects were just beginning. After such a physical and psychological onslaught, the SS troops were in disarray. Some 250 of them withdrew from Mous, convinced that what they had just endured must surely be the vanguard of a huge force bearing down on them. A handful of men in jeeps had rattled and routed a far larger German unit of elite SS soldiers, and it was Henry Druce who had led the way. The action at Mous was just one engagement in a whole series of clashes, as Druce and his men spent months harrying the Nazis deep behind their lines. The supreme agility of these special forces fighters, combined with their extraordinary bravery in the face of almost certain death, makes for an insane story, even by the standards of the Special Air Service. And this is going to be our topic for today. Thanks for joining us. Strap yourself in as we explore Operation Loyton, a daring and extended SAS mission behind enemy lines in late 1944. And as we shine the spotlight on Henry Druce, surely one of the most remarkable soldiers of the entire war. The life of Henry Carey Druce began not in England or in the British Isles at all, but across the Channel in the Netherlands. Born in 1921 to the Belgian Mathilde Elizabeth Visser and British Army Captain Gilbert Druce, Henry spent his early days in Den Haag, The Hague, before beginning his education in the idyllic English village of Sherborne, Dorset.
I feel like before we go into any more of Henry Druce's story, Henry Druce is absolutely legendary. The fact that this man led a small troop of SAS soldiers and would go in and out very quickly and destroy these German units and put the fear of God into them. Be like, they got to be part of a much bigger unit. It's time for me to go ahead and quit. You know, if I stick around here, they gonna come through again and they gonna bring the rest of their unit and we gonna be dead. Little did these German soldiers know they were a much bigger unit than what the little SAS unit had. But it's not about the size of the dog in the fight. It's about the size of the fight and the dog, and the British SAS had an incredible amount of fight in them that them German SS soldiers were not prepared for. Alright, now let's learn about you, Henry.
From here, his next stop was Norfolk in East Anglia and the famed Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst. At a tender age, this young boy, rapidly becoming a man, had chosen his career and path in life. He would be a soldier, like his father, and an exceptional one at that. Multilingual thanks to his upbringing, Druce spoke excellent French, Dutch, and Flemish, something that made him incredibly valuable when war was declared. But Druce was still only 17 in September 1939. He would have to wait. His time would come. Upon graduating from Sandhurst, Druce became a commissioned officer for the Middlesex Regiment, but his ambition and his formidable aptitude for a new type of warfare would take him elsewhere. He volunteered for the Glider Pilot Regiment, itself only a few weeks old, and served in the 21st Independent Parachute Company. But the top brass of the British Army had other ideas for the young Druce. The soldier had caught the attention of MI6, and he was just the man the intelligence service needed for a mission behind enemy lines in the Netherlands. Druce would not complete his mission in Europe. Working closely with a Dutch agent in the Netherlands, he was betrayed, as the Dutch contact shifted his allegiance to the Nazis. Miraculously, Druce made it back to the UK.
Yeah, he did.
He may not have experienced total success in the Netherlands, but his mission had been far from a failure.
Dude, you can't trust nobody out here. You see how fast the Dutch loyalty switched up? That's crazy, and that's one thing I didn't know. That's one thing they decided to side with Germany and the Nazis. That loyalty switched up very quickly. Thankfully, Druce got up out of there because Druce knew that was the wrong side and got back to the UK.
By now, it was 1943, and the tide of war was turning in Europe. There were new plans, big plans, and men like Henry Druce were going to be critical in their execution. The SAS fighters had made a grave mistake. Among forests of pine trees in the Vosges mountains of eastern France, they had fought hard and with bravery, tenacity, and cunning. They had achieved vital objectives across the region of eastern France, severing German communication and command structures and laying the groundwork for the regular Allied advance from the beachhead at Normandy. And then, when all seemed lost and there was no other way out, they surrendered. They threw themselves upon the mercy of their captors. No such mercy would be granted. Under the Geneva Convention, these men who had fought in the uniforms of the SAS should have been protected. But the German forces, under the direct orders of Adolf Hitler, had no time for such formalities. Special forces, commandos, irregular troops of all kinds were sources of information and intelligence and nothing else. Once that information and intelligence were exhausted, they were of no further use. As it dawned upon the SAS men what was to come, the gravity of their error became clear. In the face of Nazi torture, fighting to the death would have been preferable. Once the Germans had finished with them, the SAS troops were stripped naked and forced into lines beside a ditch. Shots rang out, and the 8 soldiers fell lifeless into their hastily dug graves. To this day, on the spot where they met their ends, in the October of 1944, the names of those warriors are recorded on a memorial. Sergeant Ralph Hay, Sergeant Walter Neville, Lance Corporal George Robinson, Private Frederick Austin, Private James Bennett, Private Reginald Church, Private Peter McGovern, and Private Edwin Weaver are remembered here forevermore. The brutality with which these men were dealt with highlighted the grim reality of their mission. Operation Loyton was no everyday exercise. Success was critical, opening up a line of advance for the regular troops pushing southwards and eastwards into France, headed for the border with Belgium and Germany. At the same time, the stakes were enormously high. Now on the back foot, the German occupiers were in no mood to mess about, and they would be ruthless in their reprisals. To understand this mission, we need to go back several months to the summer of 1944 and the aftermath of the Normandy landings. On June 6th, Allied forces had landed at Normandy in an amphibious operation that has gone down as one of the most famous in history. The glory of that day, its suffering, and its significance in the timeline of the war in Europe have not been forgotten. But not everything went as planned. One of the objectives for D-Day, the town of Caen, did not fall for another month, and Germany's fighting forces in France were still very much primed and ready for action after the invasion began. Even at the westernmost point of the Allied landings, furthest from their resupply lines and high command, there was staunch resistance from the German defenders. It would be 2 weeks before Cherbourg was taken, and Saint-Lô did not fall until mid-July. This would not be a sweeping campaign, a romp to victory. This was going to be a drawn-out, bloody affair. The costly
because I heard so many stories like that. Oh, when the Americans came, the war was basically over. And so, definitely know the storming of Normandy. Definitely know the history behind that. But so, hey, Americans came and Germany was still fighting strong. Germany was still they still wasn't ready to surrender, so they fighting, and it's taking a little bit more time probably than expected to take over certain towns and take over places, but that's okay. Good things come to those who wait. They patiently kept fighting, and they took over town by town, and they got these Germans up out of there town by town. R.I.P. to those 8 SAS soldiers and all those who lost their lives fighting against the Nazis. To think that people with such horrific ideologies, that could happen is crazy. But I mean, that we live in a world where this happens all the time. It's sad, it's horrific, and I'm so grateful that they were beaten. So to those ideologies can't be allowed to continue. Can't be allowed to be acted upon. Can't be allowed to influence others. So this was an absolute epic win, but of course it came with a certain amount of loss as well. But let's continue to
failure of Operation Market Garden would not even begin until September, while the grim horror of the Ardennes and the Battle of the Bulge was still to come that winter. There was much fighting left to be done if the Allies were to be victorious, and conversely, there was still plenty of fight left in the Wehrmacht and the Luftwaffe. Even at this relatively early stage in the invasion, the Allies understood that their regular troops needed assistance. The North African campaigns had been successful largely thanks to the Special Forces units that did not let their enemy rest, even when the regular army was being pushed back across the desert. Units like the Special Air Service had performed admirably in the difficult conditions of the Northern Sahara and had caused havoc behind Axis lines. Now, with the potential of a stalled advance in Western Europe, something that could not be allowed to happen, the SAS would find themselves in action again. On August 12, 1944, it was Henry Druce and his men who were thrown into the fray. The first action of Operation Loyton would be the deployment of Druce's advance party, parachuted deep behind enemy lines into the Vosges Mountains near Strasbourg on the east of France. Their objective? Make contact with the Maquis units of the French resistance operating in the area, scout out potential targets for future attacks, and secure possible landing zones for the main SAS forces that would follow.
Okay.
The opening weeks of Druce's mission were largely successful. They made contact, reconnoitred targets, and provided the main force, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Brian Franks, a place to land. On August 30th, Franks' unit joined Druce's, and things began to go awry almost immediately. A local resistance fighter mistakenly ate some of the SAS's plastic explosive, believing it to be a type of cheese. He did not survive. The arriving units also stumbled across an...
What did he eat? In the first bite he took, he ain't realized this ain't cheese. How much did he have to eat for it to be fatal? Was it just in that first bite that was enough for it to be fatal and kill him? Or did he continue trying to eat this? Oh my days.
An unidentified local villager who claimed he was hunting for mushrooms. Whether or not this was the case, his arrest caused chaos in the ranks, and the explosion of an ammunition crate led to a firefight in which a man was killed. It seems unlikely that this mushroom-picking man, presuming he was an informer, would have had time to relay the SAS's positions to the German forces in the area. But the following day, it became clear that someone had done. The area was crawling with German soldiers, and reconnaissance patrols identified a reinforcement column of 5,000 men advancing close to the village of Mous. This was a real problem. In a flash, the nature of the SAS mission shifted from one of observation and guerrilla assault to simple survival. Druce, Franks, their men, and their allies in the Maquis spent 2 weeks evading German patrols and trying desperately to stay alive. With their base camp compromised and then moved, resupply became almost impossible, and the men were rapidly running out of food and ammunition. And yet still, Druce and his comrades sought out opportunities to attack and inflicted significant casualties on the Germans in the region. An already death-defying mission had taken on an even more lethal hue, but the SAS men were keen to make it a success. This is what brought Druce and his raiding party on that September morning in 1944 to the outskirts of Mous, ready to raise hell. And raise hell they did, laying waste to German defenses and sowing panic and chaos among their ranks.
Yeah, they did.
And then they were off, back into the hills, out of reach of the Germans, many of whom fled in terror.
Yeah.
This is what Henry Druce and his SAS men were all about.
That's what I'm
Hit
talking about.
and hit hard, then get away as quickly as you arrived.
That's what it's like.
Action.
The sweet science of hitting without getting hit. Hit hard, get out of there, regroup. Hit hard, get out of there, regroup. Hit hard. Hey, put the fear of God into these Germans. They said, God dang. This small group, right, basically was supposed to just be a reconnaissance mission. They're supposed to just gather intelligence. That's it. But it looked like they got caught, and now they dodging German patrols for the next couple of weeks. And then I said, hey, we tired of running and hiding. Let's bring the fight to them. And so they did. And in doing that, they terrified these Germans. The Germans probably ain't understand how they could fight like this. And they hadn't fought anybody who had delivered this type of fight.
Actions like the one at Mous were hoping to tip the balance, at least a little, in the Allies' favour. But the SAS forces had even bigger fish to fry. One of their key objectives was to ravage the German headquarters in the area, breaking down the chain of command and making ongoing hostilities difficult for the Nazis. Acting on the intelligence they had gathered, Druce and his men set about doing exactly this. In that same ultralight, heavily armed jeeps that were parachuted in, struck terror into the heart of the German troops at Mous, with the SAS party camouflaging themselves in the thick undergrowth by the side of a winding mountain road and waiting to strike. Seconds must have seemed like hours to the men in those jeeps, unsure of whether they were waiting for nothing at all, or worse, about to fling themselves into an ambush. Finally, their target came into view. A Nazi staff car that resembled something like a sleek peacetime limousine designed for a member of the aristocracy. But then, another car rounded the curve into the view of the SAS troopers. It was a second staff car, and then, unbelievably, a third. Druce and his party could scarcely believe the trophies that had fallen into their laps as they squeezed the triggers of their machine guns. Within seconds, the party had eliminated 3 cars worth of German officers, severely hampering the German war effort in the Vosges. Of course, the staff cars weren't alone, but by the time the German infantry had caught up to the scene of the carnage, Druce and his men were long gone.
Was too late.
In the east of France, the SAS fighters...
The SAS, bro, since their formation, has been absolutely elite, has been absolutely critical when it comes to war. These gifts, these presents, these German officers rolling in these cars, and I'm sure that the SAS could tell by the cars, Joyce could tell by the cars, these officers, and I couldn't believe that they just fell. And so what they do, they emptied the clip. Fired as much bullets into them cars as possible, and by the time the infantry came, they was already long gone. They hit hard, and they got up out of there.
Of Druce and Franks, and the men and women of the Marquis were busy whipping up a whirlwind of destruction behind enemy lines, but they were certainly not unopposed. On the opposing side, 2 more key points lays in the drama that was unfolding close to the German frontier. A certain Colonel Erich Isselhorst and his trusted officer, Major Hans Ernst. A veteran of the Eastern Fronts, and now the regional Gestapo chief, Isselhorst had already proved himself as a scourge of resistance fighters in Russia. The colonel had been happy to annihilate and execute partisans and saboteurs in the East, so why should he not do the same thing here? Major Ernst had shown himself to be similarly brutal, signing off on the delivery of some 800 French Jews to the death camp of Auschwitz and deploying almost medieval methods during interrogation sessions. Together, they would launch Operation Waldfest, Forest Party or Party in the Forest, an action designed to root out the SAS operatives, the Maquis fighters, and any civilians who might get in the way. Tragically, It was the civilians who proved to be the easiest target. In Mous, appalled by the apparent ease with which SAS fighters had routed the German defenders, a specially designated SS punishment squad was set up. The reprisals against the villagers, the majority of whom knew barely anything about the identity or whereabouts of the raiders, were nothing short of horrific. The villagers at Mous were given a choice: speak and go free, or stay silent and suffer the consequences. Astonishingly, they all chose to stay quiet, even under torture, and many were executed. Some of the villagers were more active in their work with Allied forces. One, Madame Ross, had 6 SAS men in her home on the outskirts of the village and refused to hand them over, even when the Gestapo knocked at the door. Another, Mademoiselle Bégueron, acted as a go-between for the SAS and the French resistance during Operation Loyton. Her 80-year-old mother was reportedly captured by the Germans and subjected to humiliation and abuse until she collapsed and died.
An 80 that just lets you know like how sick the freaking Nazis were. How sick the Germans. An 80-year-old woman, bro. That's just absolutely freaking disgusting. Shout out to these French civilians that were so courageous in order to help. They house SAS soldiers, hid them, helped them, or to go between them and the French revolutionaries. Man. And as a civilian, you just the risk that they're putting themselves at. You're putting your life on the line to help. But the cause was that big. So shout out to the civilians. Absolutely incredible.
Drus and Franks did not stand idly by as the Germans unleashed their vengeance upon the local population. On one occasion, Drus and a small team daringly piloted their jeep right into the town square at Mous, where villagers were being rounded up by SS men. The aim was to create enough of a distraction for those arrested to get away. Some did, and as many as 20 SS troops were killed in the chaotic firefight that followed. But large numbers of the villagers were deported to the east, and to certain death. There was another problem. The mission in the Vosges was not supposed to be an indefinite one. The initial idea was that the regular troops would eventually catch up with them, punching through to create an open corridor to the German border. But Allied forces were advancing too slowly. At this rate, the special forces operating in the east would run out of supplies and be dangerously exposed, or they would be killed in battle, captured, tortured, executed. All manner of horrendous fates awaited the SAS men. And for many, this was the reality. Don't forget Hay, Neville, Robinson, Austin, Bennett, Church, McGovern, Weaver, tortured and then shot to death by their captors on October 1944. These represent just 8 of the troops who fell into Nazi hands and were never seen again. In total, 31 of the SAS men were captured and summarily executed when they should have been kept as legitimate prisoners. Countless more French resistance fighters and civilians would perish in a similarly barbaric fashion. Before finishing up Operation Loyton, there was more work to be done. In September, Drus and a comrade had received movement orders for the 21st Panzer Division. Having made a name for themselves in North Africa, the 21st was now busy defending the Vosges after having taken part in the Normandy defense. The intelligence was a treasure trove. Divisional command structures, unit distributions, defense points, and movements were all detailed. Such intelligence was too cumbersome and important to be transmitted via radio. The only option would be to deliver it directly to General Patton. Patton, the famous hard-charging American general, had been bogged down, and information such as Drus had would be game-changing, with the potential to save scores of American lives. Drus immediately took up the mission of crossing over the front lines to meet up with American forces, but this would be no casual stroll through the forest. As a companion, Drus brought with him Lou Fiddick, a Canadian Air Service member who was shot down and who later found the SAS thanks to the French resistance. Despite an early standoff with some German sentries, the two made steady progress toward the American forces. After a tense river crossing, the two men would, quite literally, stumble into the German frontline trenches before crawling silently across the no man's land toward the Allies. After reaching the Free French sector of the lines, Fiddick and Druce would turn over their precious cargo, but not before Druce was given orders to return back across enemy lines to replace a broken radio set. Shortly after returning to the Vosges, in what must have seemed like deja vu, Druce was given yet more intelligence that would save Allied lives.
That's crazy, bro. Druce and Fiddick crossing no man's land, crawling silently, bro. They call no man's land for a reason, and the fact that they crossed that, but in doing so, saved so many American lives to get this valuable information that could not be transmitted on the radio because you never know who's listening. It had to be done in person, and they were the ones to deliver that. And then for Druce to get orders to go back and replace a broken radio, hey, bro, this man definitely deserves every medal of honor there is.
This time of multiple divisions of German reinforcements. Druce was sent to cross over the front lines a third time. In the end, the order came to disperse. The SAS fighters broke up into smaller groups and began their retreat westwards toward the Allied lines. Both Druce and Franks made it back to Britain, and Franks made it his mission to find out exactly what had happened to those men under his command who never returned. Franks' efforts, along with those of Major Eric Barkworth and other investigators, uncovered the reality of Hitler's commando order. A breach of the Geneva Convention that enabled and even encouraged the murder of prisoners of war deemed to belong to Special Forces outfits. Of the 31 who were captured, 30 were confirmed as unlawfully executed. The fate of that 31st soldier remains unknown to this day. Isselhorst survived the war. He faced a military tribunal in 1946 and was sentenced to death. The sentence was carried out in Strasbourg on February 23, 1948. After his experiences in the Vosges, Druce would have been forgiven for taking a few years off, or maybe retiring and living out the rest of his life in peace and quiet.
Definitely.
Needless to say, he did not.
Of course he did.
The war was not over, and there was more fighting to be done. Promoted to major, Druce rejoined his SAS comrades in the Netherlands, leading a jeep column that harangued and harassed Axis positions even into the final days and weeks of the war. With the war over, Druce returned to MI6, serving in Europe and then in Indonesia. After Indonesian independence in 1949, he remained in Java for another 2 years. Then, he and his family moved to Canada. Running a successful shipping business in Newfoundland and then one in the Caribbean, Druce eventually retired to British Columbia, where he remained in touch with his former SAS brothers for the rest of his life.
I love that.
He died in 2007, aged 85, survived by his wife Mary and their 3 children. The Croix de Guerre with Palm he received following his action in France, and his Order of Oranje Nassau for his work in Indonesia, goes some way to demonstrate the truly remarkable nature of this man's life. But even they only tell part of the story. In 1945, while Druce and his men sat waiting for a regular Canadian column at a cafe in Delin in the Netherlands, a German motorcyclist stumbled upon them. For once, Druce and his men had the numerical advantage, and immediately they advanced upon the lone German. The soldier was ordered to dismount. He refused. In his saddlebags was a stolen ham, pilfered from civilians in nearby Arnhem. Druce took the ham, knocked the soldier from his motorcycle with it, and arrested him. His attire for this unorthodox encounter? Corduroy trousers and a black silk top hat. From out of the tragedy of the Second World War come stories of bravery, resourcefulness, and of characters who were truly one of a kind. To say that the tale of Major Henry Druce ticks all of these boxes is something of an understatement. We may never know the countless lives that Henry Druce saved in his 3 sojourns across the front lines of one of the most intense wars humanity has ever seen. We'd love to know what you think about all of this. Is there anyone else from the formidable SAS regiment you'd like to see us cover? Let us know in the comments section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you learned something new.
I gotta give a big shout out to Druce, man. As courageous as they come, as brave as they come, as daring as they come, and as effective as they come. This man Druce spent his whole life, it seems like, helping people. He fought and fought and fought and fought, and the man was one of the best fighters there is. So the fact that he got medals from Indonesia, the fact that he got medals from, where was France, was it that they said? Or the second other place he had gotten a medal from, and you know he had to get medals from the UK. Everything he did helped not only the UK, helped not only Americans, but helped the rest of the world in the fight against the Germans. So he definitely deserves to be remembered as a hero. Thank you, Juice. That's all we got. Let me know what you guys think about the video. If you enjoyed, don't forget to subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and check out the next one. I'll see y'all next time.